My name is Alyssa Dunn. I'm 26 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been raising my sister's 4 children as if they were my own. My bakery business completely collapsed and left me financially devastated. So I packed up what little I had and moved in with her, hoping to start fresh and rebuild my life from the ground up. But instead of getting the chance to reconstruct my future, I became her unpaid childcare provider, spending my days cooking meals, driving the kids around town, and taking on every parenting responsibility while she worked night shifts at the supermarket and barely made an appearance during the day. I managed to squeeze in a part-time job at a local coffee shop and enrolled in late-night graphic design classes, desperately chasing a dream that seemed to drift further and further away with each passing day. Then one evening, completely out of nowhere, she dropped a massive bombshell on me. "I'm pregnant again," she announced. A fifth child. My stomach immediately twisted into knots. I'd already sacrificed everything I had. My entire savings account, my personal goals and ambitions, my freedom to live my own life. And now there was going to be another baby added to the mix. I was completely done. "I can't keep doing this anymore," I snapped, my voice trembling and shaking as I stormed off to my bedroom. Her face instantly hardened, transforming into a cold mask as if I'd committed the ultimate betrayal against her. I decided right then and there that I needed to move out, to finally start living for myself instead of existing solely for someone else's benefit. But she didn't let it go easily at all. Her reaction was absolutely explosive, and things spiraled out of control incredibly fast. What happened next completely turned our entire family upside down and inside out. If you've ever felt stuck carrying someone else's burden and load, drop your story down in the comments section below. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to see exactly how this drama unfolds and develops. You absolutely won't believe what she did next. Looking back now, every single day spent with my sister's kids felt like a never-ending battle that I couldn't escape from. I woke up each morning to the usual chaos and disorder. My alarm clock blared loudly at 5:30 in the morning, and I dragged my exhausted body out of bed to get the children ready for their day. The oldest one, Logan, who's 15 years old, was already in the middle of a heated argument with his sister, Ellie, who's 12, about who rightfully got to have the last Pop-Tart in the box. "You ate mine yesterday," Ellie shouted at the top of her lungs, violently slamming the cupboard door shut. I immediately stepped in to mediate, splitting the pastry directly in half while Hunter, who's 9 years old, accidentally spilled bright orange juice all over the kitchen counter. Nora, the youngest at 6 years old, clung tightly to my leg, desperately begging me to put her hair in braids before she went to school. I barely had enough time to gulp down some cold, stale coffee before herding all of them into the car and piling them inside. The drive to school every morning was like managing a three-ring circus. Logan was blasting his music at maximum volume. Ellie was complaining endlessly about her math homework. Hunter was asking completely random questions about dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures, and Nora was singing completely off-key at the top of her little lungs. By the time I finally dropped them all off at their respective schools, my head was absolutely pounding with a severe headache. I rushed straight from drop-off to the coffee shop for my 6-hour shift, steaming pitcher after pitcher of milk and forcing bright smiles for cranky, impatient customers who treated me like I was invisible. "Can you make it quick?" A guy dressed in an expensive business suit barked at me rudely, acting like I wasn't already juggling and managing 3 separate orders simultaneously. I earned a measly $15 per hour, which was barely enough money to cover my monthly phone bill and the gas I used driving everyone around. After my work shift ended, I picked up the kids from school, helped them struggle through their homework assignments, and cooked a big pot of spaghetti for dinner while simultaneously breaking up yet another fight between them. This time the argument was over whose turn it was to feed the family dog. Cheryl, my sister, worked night shifts at the local supermarket alongside her boyfriend Blake. So she was either sound asleep during the day or completely gone from the house. I'd managed to catch her for maybe 10 minutes total each day, when she'd mumble something like, "Thanks for holding it all together," before immediately crashing on the living room couch in exhaustion. Nights were truly my only real escape from the madness. After tucking little Nora into bed and carefully checking over Ellie's complicated algebra problems, I would open up my laptop computer to work on my graphic design classes. I'd always genuinely loved creating logos and brand identities, dreaming of eventually opening my own professional design studio someday. But sitting there staring at Photoshop tutorials at midnight after such exhausting days felt like I was chasing after a ghost that I could never quite catch. My eyes burned intensely from sheer exhaustion, and I'd frequently nod off in the middle of lessons, only to wake up hours later to discover a completely dead laptop battery. One particular night, Ellie quietly crept into my room, asking me softly why I always looked so incredibly tired. "Just trying my best to keep up with everything," I said to her, forcing yet another smile onto my face. She wrapped her small arms around me in a tight hug, and for just a brief second, I felt genuinely needed and valued. But then I caught myself thinking needed for what exactly? Changing endless diapers, driving carpools all over town, wiping away tears and soothing hurt feelings. This wasn't actually my family to care for. I started really noticing and keeping track of just how much responsibility I was actually carrying on my shoulders. Logan needed rides to his soccer practice multiple times per week. Ellie had a dance recital coming up that I absolutely couldn't miss attending. Hunter's big science project was due soon and needed supervision. And Nora's chronic asthma condition meant constant, regular trips to the pharmacy to refill her medications. I was steadily spending through my personal savings, the $3,000 that remained from my failed bakery business venture, on their school supplies, clothing, and doctor visits. Cheryl contributed financially sometimes when she could, but her money primarily went toward paying rent and buying groceries for the household. Blake, who worked the exact same shifts as Cheryl at the supermarket, never once offered a single dime to help with any expenses. "You're so naturally good with them," Cheryl would say to me repeatedly, as if it was some kind of genuine compliment or praise. But it absolutely wasn't a compliment at all. It was a carefully disguised trap. I was living out her life instead of my own, fulfilling her responsibilities instead of pursuing my own dreams and aspirations. One evening, feeling completely overwhelmed, I called Tara, my absolute best friend in the world, just to vent and release my frustrations. "I'm drowning here," I told her honestly, pacing anxiously back and forth across the kitchen floor while the kids sat in the other room watching television. Tara, who successfully ran her own freelance graphic design business and gigs, didn't sugarcoat the harsh reality for me at all. "You're not their mother, Alyssa. You simply can't keep putting your own dreams and goals on hold indefinitely like this," she said bluntly. Her words hit me incredibly hard, striking right to my core. I looked over at my laptop, which sat open to a half-finished logo design project, and suddenly realized with shocking clarity that I hadn't actually submitted any completed work in several weeks. My professors were sending me concerned emails about multiple missed deadlines, and I was falling progressively further behind in all my classes. The kids themselves weren't the actual problem or issue here. I genuinely loved their chaos and energy, their unique quirks and personalities. Logan's sarcastic jokes that made me laugh, Ellie's shy, sweet smiles, Hunter's endless stream of curious questions, Nora's clingy, affectionate hugs. They were family to me. But I wasn't their parent or their mother. Cheryl was their mother, and she was barely present in their lives. Blake, too, acted consistently like the children were entirely my responsibility to manage. I'd frequently overhear him joking casually with Cheryl about teamwork, but their version of teamwork actually meant me doing absolutely everything while they did virtually nothing. I started calculating and adding up the hours in my head. 10 hours every single day devoted to the kids, 6 hours at my coffee shop work, 3 hours attending classes or studying. That left maybe 5 hours maximum for sleep if I was extremely lucky. My dream of designing full-time, of building something meaningful and substantial for myself and my future, was rapidly slipping away through my fingers like sand. One night, after Nora cried herself to sleep over a lost stuffed animal that we couldn't locate anywhere, I sat completely alone in the quiet darkness, staring blankly at my old sketchbook and wondering what had happened to the person I used to be. I'd drawn nothing but simple stick figures for her lately, not the bold, creative designs I used to produce when I had time and energy. I closed my sketchbook, feeling my chest tighten with anxiety. I wasn't just tired anymore, I was literally disappearing as a person. Every single day I spent raising Cheryl's children was another day taking me further away from the person I actually wanted to become. I loved those kids deeply, but I couldn't continue sacrificing myself indefinitely like this. Something had to change, and it had to change soon. About a week later, I was in the middle of folding a mountain of laundry when Cheryl suddenly burst through the front door. Her face was completely lit up with an enormous grin I hadn't seen on her in several months. Right behind her walked Blake, her new boyfriend, carrying a large pizza box and looking incredibly smug and self-satisfied. "We've got some news," Cheryl announced, her voice sharp and practically vibrating with excitement. She reached out and grabbed my hand firmly, pulling me over to the living room couch. "I'm pregnant," she declared. "5th kid. Can you even believe it?" Blake nodded in agreement, casually tossing the pizza box onto the coffee table as if this announcement was some kind of grand celebration. My jaw immediately tightened, but I forced myself to smile and muttered, "Wow, congratulations!" Inside my head, though, I was absolutely reeling from the news. Another child. I was already stretched impossibly thin with the 4 kids I was caring for, and they were both acting like it was automatically my job to cheer and celebrate with them. That night, over dinner around the kitchen table, Cheryl dropped the real bombshell on me. "We've been talking," she said carefully, glancing over at Blake, who leaned back in his chair with an annoying smirk on his face. "You're so naturally good with the kids, Alyssa. We really need you to step up even more than you already are. Maybe you should quit the coffee shop job to focus on them full-time." I froze completely, my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. "Quit my job?" I repeated slowly, my voice dropping low. Blake shrugged his shoulders casually. "Yeah, we're absolutely swamped with work at the supermarket. With the new baby coming, we simply can't handle everything on our own." Cheryl immediately chimed in to add more. "Plus, we're really tight on cash right now. You could chip in about $300 a month for rent. It's only fair and reasonable since you're living here in our house." My pulse began racing frantically. $300. I was already barely scraping by financially, pouring what little remained of my savings into their kids' needs and expenses. I tried desperately to stay calm and composed. I'm already doing absolutely everything around here. The school runs, preparing all the meals, helping with homework. I simply can't quit my job. Cheryl's eyes narrowed dangerously at me. "You're here eating our food, using our space and utilities. You owe us something." Blake added his opinion. "It's just temporary, really. We'll figure everything out after the baby arrives." His casual, dismissive tone made my blood absolutely boil with anger. Temporary. I'd been serving as their crutch for 3 entire years already. I pushed my plate away from me and stood up abruptly from the table. "I need some time to think about all this," I said firmly, walking out of the room before I said something I would definitely regret later. The next day, I called Tara while the kids were safely at school. "They want me to quit my job and pay them rent," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained anger. "They're acting like I'm their live-in maid or servant." Tara didn't even hesitate in her response. "They're using you, Alyssa. You're not their employee or their property. What about your design classes? What about your future and your dreams?" Her words stung painfully, but they were absolutely true. I'd been so completely caught up in keeping their family afloat and functioning, I'd completely forgotten about my own goals and aspirations. I hung up the phone, staring at my laptop computer where an unfinished logo project sat completely untouched for days. I was falling progressively further behind in all my coursework. And for what purpose? To play substitute mom for Cheryl's kids while she lived her life? Over the next several days, Cheryl and Blake kept relentlessly pushing their agenda. Think of the kids and their needs, Cheryl said one morning, handing me a lengthy list of new chores to complete. Grocery runs, doctor appointments for Nora's chronic asthma, soccer registration fees. Blake even had the audacity to suggest I sell my old bakery equipment to help them out financially. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. They weren't asking politely for help anymore. They were demanding that I completely give up my entire life for them. I started noticing very clearly how they would consistently dodge their parental responsibilities. Cheryl would sleep right through the kids' arguments and fights, leaving me to step in and mediate the conflicts. Blake would hang around after work, joking and laughing with Cheryl while I stood in the kitchen cooking dinner for everyone. I was completely invisible to them both, just a convenient tool to make their lives significantly easier and more comfortable. One evening, Logan caught me packing up my laptop after a particularly late study session. "You okay?" he asked me, his usual sarcasm completely gone from his voice. I hesitated for a moment, then answered honestly, "I'm trying to be." He nodded slowly, like he understood far more than I thought he did. The kids weren't blind to the situation. They could clearly see how much I was doing for them. But Cheryl and Blake, they acted like it was my natural duty and obligation. I went to bed that night with my mind racing frantically. I couldn't keep this situation up any longer. My savings account was rapidly dwindling down to nothing. My classes were slipping away from me, and my dream of becoming a professional designer was quickly fading into nothing. I had to find a way out of this situation, not just for my own sake, but to show the kids that I wasn't abandoning them. I was choosing myself. I started checking rental listings online, my fingers trembling nervously as I typed search terms into the computer. $300 a month. I'd much rather spend that money on a place of my own, where I could actually live my life. I wasn't their servant or their employee, and I was completely done letting them treat me like one. The next evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table helping Ellie work through her difficult history homework when Cheryl suddenly stormed into the kitchen, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. "We need to talk right now," she snapped, her voice cutting sharply through the quiet atmosphere. I carefully set down the heavy textbook, bracing myself mentally for what was coming. "What's up?" I asked, keeping my tone as even and neutral as possible. Cheryl didn't waste a single second of time. "You're not pulling your weight around here, Alyssa. I asked you specifically to step up more, and you're still working those coffee shop shifts. It's completely irresponsible of you." My breath caught painfully in my throat. Irresponsible. I'd been running her entire household for 3 years straight. "I'm doing absolutely everything I can," I said, my voice becoming sharp with frustration. "I cook every meal, clean the house, drive the kids everywhere every single day." Cheryl rolled her eyes dismissively. "That's not nearly enough. With the baby coming soon, we need you here at home, not chasing after some silly hobby degree." I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly across the floor. "My design classes aren't a hobby," I said firmly. "They're my future, my career." Cheryl laughed, a cold, bitter sound that cut through the air. "Future? You're living in my house, eating my food, using my electricity. You think you're too good for us now, above us somehow." Her harsh words hit me like a physical slap across the face. I desperately wanted to fire back with something equally cutting, but Ellie was sitting right there watching us, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. I took a long, deep breath, trying to control my emotions and anger. "I'm not your servant, Cheryl," I said firmly, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. I've given you 3 entire years of my life." She took a step closer to me, her voice dropping to a low, threatening tone. "If you're not all in and completely committed, maybe you shouldn't be here at all anymore." I froze completely, my body going rigid. Was she actually kicking me out? Before I could formulate any kind of response, she turned sharply on her heel and left the room, leaving me standing there shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. I immediately grabbed my phone and called Tara, pacing frantically back and forth in the backyard. "She called me irresponsible," I said, my voice tight with emotion. "She genuinely thinks I owe her my entire life, like I'm some kind of indentured servant." Tara's voice came through calm, but incredibly firm. "Alyssa, you need to set proper boundaries right now. You're not her employee or her mother. You deserve your own space, your own personal goals and dreams." I nodded my head, even though she obviously couldn't see me through the phone. "I know you're right, but the kids, they genuinely need me." Tara immediately cut me off before I could continue. "They need their mother, not you sacrificing absolutely everything for them. Find a place of your own. You've got some savings left, right?" Her words lit a spark of hope inside me. I'd been so intensely focused on Cheryl's constant demands and expectations, I hadn't even thought about what I could actually do for myself. That night, I opened my laptop and started seriously searching for apartments in Madison. I found several listings, mostly small studio apartments downtown, ranging around $1,500 per month. My savings, the $3,000 that remained from my old bakery business, could cover a security deposit and the first month's rent. I'd need to keep my coffee shop job, maybe even pick up some extra shifts to make it work. I started crunching all the numbers carefully, my heart racing with an unusual mix of fear and genuine excitement. I could actually make this work. I absolutely had to, but the kids' faces kept flashing repeatedly in my mind. Logan's quiet worry and concern, Ellie's shy, warm hugs, Hunter's endless chatter about everything and nothing, Nora's clingy little hands. Leaving would undoubtedly hurt them emotionally, but staying here meant completely losing myself in the process. The next day, I sat Logan down after school for a serious conversation. "I'm thinking about moving out," I said carefully, watching his face for his reaction. He frowned deeply, picking nervously at his hoodie. "Because of Mom?" he asked directly. I nodded honestly. "I need to live my own life too, but I'll still be here for you guys, just differently than before." He didn't say much in response, but I could tell he was processing this information and working through his feelings about it. I spent the entire evening mapping out a detailed budget on paper. $1,500 for monthly rent, $500 for utilities and groceries, $200 for continuing my design classes. My coffee shop pay, $15 per hour working 30 hours per week, would just barely cover everything if I cut corners and was extremely careful with my spending. I'd have to skip buying new clothes, eating out at restaurants, anything extra or unnecessary. Cheryl definitely noticed my emotional distance over the next several days. "You're acting really weird lately," she said one morning, catching me checking apartment listings on my phone. I didn't even look up at her. "Just planning," I said, my voice deliberately flat and emotionless. She scoffed loudly. "Planning to bail on us. Typical selfish behavior." Her words stung painfully, but I didn't bite back or engage. I was completely done fighting on her terms and playing her games. Tara texted me later that evening, checking in on me. "You're doing the right thing," she wrote supportively. "Don't let her guilt trip you into staying." I clung to those words of encouragement, knowing deep down that I had to break free from this situation. I wasn't just leaving a house and a living arrangement. I was actively claiming my life back and reclaiming my identity. By the end of that week, I had compiled a comprehensive list of apartments to visit and a solid plan to make this happen, no matter what Cheryl decided to throw at me next. A few days later, I slipped out quietly after dropping the kids at school to visit my first apartment listing in Madison. The studio was admittedly small, just a single room with a tiny kitchenette area, but it was mine to imagine, a space where I could actually breathe freely, work on my design projects, and just be myself. The landlord quoted me $1,500 per month, plus a security deposit. I nodded, clutching my phone where I'd saved screenshots of 3 other potential listings. My savings of $3,000 would cover the initial move, but I'd need to stretch every single penny and be incredibly careful with my finances. Back at Cheryl's house, I kept my plans completely quiet, deliberately dodging her pointed glares and suspicious looks. I wasn't ready for another explosive fight, not yet anyway. Instead, I focused my energy on preparing the kids mentally and practically for this change, starting with Logan. After dinner one evening, I pulled him aside while Ellie was helping Hunter with a complicated puzzle. "Logan, we need to talk seriously," I said, handing him a notebook. "If I move out, you'll need to step up and take on more responsibility." His eyes immediately flashed with anger and hurt. "You're leaving us because of Mom, aren't you?" he snapped accusingly, tossing the notebook roughly onto the table. I kept my voice steady and calm. "I'm not leaving you kids. I'm teaching you how to handle things independently." I showed him carefully how to make a proper grocery list, how to plan simple meals like tacos or spaghetti, and how to check Nora's asthma inhaler to make sure it wasn't empty. He grumbled and complained, but he listened attentively, scribbling notes in the notebook. "You're 15 years old," I said firmly. "You're smart and capable. You can absolutely do this." His jaw tightened with emotion, but he didn't argue with me. Ellie overheard parts of our conversation and cornered me later in my room, her voice small and vulnerable. "Are you moving because we're too much trouble?" she asked, nervously twisting her hair around her finger. My heart immediately sank with guilt. "No, Ellie, it's absolutely not you kids. I just need my own space to live and grow." She wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug, her face buried in my shoulder, and I felt her quiet sobs shaking her small body. I held her tight, promising sincerely to stay close and involved in their lives. Hunter and Nora were significantly trickier to talk to about this. At 9 and 6 years old, they didn't fully grasp the complete picture or understand the implications. Over breakfast one morning, I explained as simply as I could that I might live somewhere else soon. Hunter frowned, stirring his cereal slowly. "Who's going to help me with my science projects?" he asked worriedly. Nora's bottom lip trembled dangerously. "Will you still braid my hair the way I like?" she asked, tears forming in her eyes. I reassured them both repeatedly that I'd visit often, but their confused, hurt looks lingered in my mind long after. I spent the next several days visiting more apartment options around the city. One apartment had a lovely view of a park. Another was significantly closer to the coffee shop, which would save on gas. I finally narrowed it down to a studio I could realistically afford, constantly calculating costs in my head. My job brought in approximately $1,800 per month, which was just enough for rent, utilities, and basic food if I skipped all extras and luxuries. I'd have to temporarily pause my design classes for about a month to save up some cash, but I could pick them up again once I was settled. Tara called to check in on me, absolutely thrilled that I was finally moving forward with my plans. "You're taking control of your life," she said enthusiastically. "The kids will be okay. They've got you as an example of strength." Her words gave me genuine strength and courage, but the kids' varied reactions weighed heavily on my conscience. One evening, I took the time to teach Logan how to properly use the washing machine. "Load it like this," I explained carefully, showing him exactly how to measure the right amount of detergent. He rolled his eyes in typical teenage fashion, but he paid close attention to everything I was demonstrating. "Mom never does this stuff," he muttered under his breath. I simply nodded, keeping quiet and not responding to his observation. Logan was gradually starting to see and recognize Cheryl's consistent absence and lack of involvement, and it hurt him far more deeply than he was willing to let on. Ellie stayed close to me during this time, helping Nora with her bedtime stories every night, but her eyes were constantly red and puffy from crying. Hunter kept asking repeatedly when exactly I'd visit them, and Nora clung to me, constantly whispering desperately, "Don't go far away from us." I felt completely torn and half emotionally, but I knew I couldn't back down from this decision now. By the end of that week, I'd successfully scheduled a lease signing appointment for the studio apartment. I packed a small bag with essentials, including my laptop and a few of my favorite sketches, keeping everything carefully hidden in my bedroom closet. Cheryl hadn't noticed anything unusual. She was too busy spending time with Blake or sleeping off her exhausting night shifts at the supermarket. I told the kids honestly that I'd be moving soon, but I promised sincerely to call them daily and visit often. Logan's initial anger gradually softened into a grudging nod of acceptance. Ellie gave me a beautiful drawing she'd made of us together, her special way of saying she'd miss me terribly. Hunter and Nora still seemed confused and lost, but I genuinely hoped they'd understand my reasons in time. I wasn't abandoning them at all. I was showing them through my actions how to stand up for yourself and set healthy boundaries. As I finalized all my moving plans, I felt a genuine flicker of hope inside me. I was ready to take this important step forward, even if it meant facing whatever challenges came next completely alone. The following week, I hauled my last cardboard box into my new studio apartment in Madison. It was admittedly small and sparse, with just a mattress on the floor and a simple desk, but it was entirely my own space, representing a fresh start and new beginning. I carefully arranged my laptop and a few of my favorite sketches around the room, feeling lighter and freer than I had felt in years. I sent a quick text message to Logan, Hunter, and Nora, promising a fun pizza night together very soon. Cheryl hadn't spoken a single word to me since I signed the lease agreement, and her cold shoulder treatment was honestly a relief after enduring months of constant tension and conflict. I genuinely thought I'd left all the chaos and drama behind me, but I seriously underestimated her capacity for vindictiveness. 3 days later, my phone suddenly rang displaying an unknown number. "This is Officer Doyle from the Madison Police Department," a steady, professional voice said. My stomach immediately dropped with dread. "We've received a complaint about you. Can you meet us at your sister's address right away?" I drove over to Cheryl's house, my mind racing frantically with possibilities and worst-case scenarios. When I pulled up to the curb, 2 uniformed police officers stood outside the house. Officer Doyle held a clipboard in hand, and Officer Reed was scanning the street carefully. Cheryl was standing on the porch, her face completely flushed with rage and indignation. "She stole $500 from me and trashed our stuff," Cheryl shouted loudly, jabbing an accusing finger directly at me. "The washing machine's broken and the sofa's ripped up." I blinked repeatedly, absolutely shocked by these accusations. "I didn't take anything at all," I said firmly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I moved out clean without touching anything." Officer Doyle raised an eyebrow skeptically. "Let's see the alleged damage," he said professionally. Cheryl led us all inside the house, pointing dramatically to a sofa with a torn cushion and a washing machine that wouldn't start when she demonstrated it. "She did all this before she left," Cheryl insisted adamantly. I shook my head emphatically. "I haven't touched your things at all. I've been at my own place all week long." Officer Reed examined the sofa closely, noting old stains beneath the tear in the fabric. "This doesn't look recent at all," he observed carefully. He then checked the washing machine thoroughly, finding a loose wire connection. "Could be simple wear and tear from regular use," he added thoughtfully. I turned directly to face Cheryl. "You know perfectly well I didn't steal anything from you. Search my car, search my apartment. Go right ahead." Officer Doyle looked directly at Cheryl with a serious expression. "You're claiming theft and vandalism. Got any actual proof to support these accusations?" Cheryl hesitated noticeably, her eyes darting around nervously. The money was in my dresser drawer, she muttered weakly. She knew exactly where it was kept. Before I could formulate any response, Logan suddenly stepped into the room, his face tense and determined. "I need to talk to you officers," he said, glancing between the police officers. My heart pounded loudly in my chest. What was he planning to do? Logan faced Officer Doyle directly and spoke clearly. "Mom's making all this up completely. That sofa's been torn for months now. Hunter spilled juice all over it last summer, and it never got properly cleaned. The washing machine broke several weeks ago because Mom constantly overloaded it with too many clothes. And the money she's talking about? She spent it on groceries and cigarettes and never told anyone about it." Cheryl's eyes widened dramatically with shock and anger. "Logan, that's enough!" she snapped sharply, but her voice shook noticeably with nervousness. Logan didn't back down, even slightly. "Alyssa's been more of a real parent to us than you have. She paid for all our school supplies and field trips, drove us everywhere we needed to go, while you and Blake were barely here at all." I stared at him in amazement, my chest tight with emotion. Officer Reed jotted down notes carefully, his expression remaining completely neutral and professional. "So, there was no actual theft or recent damage?" he asked Logan directly. "None at all," Logan said confidently, crossing his arms. "Mom's just really mad that Alyssa finally moved out and stopped being her free servant." Cheryl's face reddened considerably, but she stayed completely silent, unable to dispute what Logan had said. Officer Doyle sighed heavily with clear frustration. "Ma'am, false reports are a serious problem and waste our resources. We'll let this slide with a warning this time, but don't call us again unless it's a real emergency." The officers nodded politely to me and left the property. I immediately pulled Logan aside in the driveway, away from Cheryl's hearing. "You didn't need to do that for me," I said softly, my voice filled with gratitude. He shrugged casually, kicking a small pebble across the pavement. "You don't deserve any of this treatment. You've always been there for us when we needed someone." I hugged him tightly, fighting back tears of relief and appreciation. Back at my studio apartment later that evening, I called Tara, still feeling rattled and shaken by the whole experience. "Cheryl tried to pin theft and vandalism charges on me," I said, pacing back and forth across my small space. "Logan set them straight and told the truth, but I'm completely done with her manipulative games." Tara's voice was sharp with anger on my behalf. "She's lashing out because she's losing control over you. Keep your distance from her from now on." I agreed completely, staring around at my bare, sparsely furnished apartment. It wasn't much to look at yet, but it was mine, and it was free from Cheryl's lies and manipulation. That evening, I texted Ellie to check in on her and see how she was handling everything. Ellie sent me a sweet photo of her latest drawing, a colorful picture of our family. Hunter asked eagerly about visiting my new place, and Nora begged desperately for me to tell her a bedtime story over the phone. I promised sincerely to see them all very soon, but Cheryl's false accusations had changed everything about our relationship dynamic. Logan's words during the police confrontation hit me incredibly hard. She and Blake were barely present in the kids' lives. The children deserved so much better than what they were getting, and I couldn't keep shielding and covering up Cheryl's failures as a parent. I sat at my desk in my studio apartment, sketching a new logo design, my hands steady and confident for the first time in many months. Cheryl could try her best to sabotage me and ruin my life, but I was building something entirely new for myself, and no one could take that achievement away from me. 2 weeks later, my phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call from Logan. His voice was noticeably shaky and filled with worry. "Mom's in the hospital. Something serious about her pregnancy. The kids are absolutely freaking out here." I froze completely, my coffee mug suspended halfway to my lips. Despite absolutely everything that had happened between us, Cheryl's terrible accusations, her manipulative lies, I immediately thought of Ellie's tearful hugs, Nora's requests for braids, Hunter's endless chatter. They didn't deserve to suffer through this crisis. I drove directly to the hospital, my mind racing frantically with concerns and possibilities. A doctor, Dr. Patel, met me in the crowded waiting area. "Your sister has placenta previa," she explained carefully. "She needs complete bed rest, possibly until delivery. It's quite serious." I nodded, my chest tight with anxiety. 3 months. That's what she'd need for proper recovery. I found Cheryl in her hospital room, looking pale and unusually quiet, a stark contrast to her usual fiery, confrontational personality. "The kids need you desperately," she said weakly, barely meeting my eyes with shame. I wanted desperately to walk away and never look back, but Logan's worried call echoed repeatedly in my head. "I'll help," I said finally, my voice steady and controlled. "But only for the kids' sake, and on my terms this time." Cheryl frowned with displeasure, but I didn't waver or back down even slightly. "I keep my job, my apartment, and I'm not paying you a single dime. I'll stay and help for 3 months maximum to get the kids through this crisis." She nodded reluctantly, too exhausted and tired to argue with my conditions. I wasn't doing this here for her benefit. I was here exclusively for Logan, Ellie, Hunter, and Nora. Back at the house, the kids were an absolute mess emotionally. Ellie clung tightly to me, whispering anxiously, "Is Mom going to be okay?" I hugged her warmly, promising that Dr. Patel was taking excellent care of her. Hunter kept asking repeatedly why Blake wasn't home helping, and Nora refused stubbornly to sleep without me being nearby in the house. Logan tried his best to hold it together and be strong, but his clenched fists betrayed his deep worry and anxiety. The house felt like a violent storm had hit it directly. Dirty dishes piled high in the sink, laundry overflowing from baskets, homework papers scattered everywhere across surfaces. Blake was nowhere to be seen anywhere. His work shifts at the supermarket were supposedly stretching longer than usual, though I suspected avoidance. When I finally saw him briefly, he barely spoke any words, just grabbing a beer from the refrigerator and disappearing quickly to the garage to hide. "He's been exactly like this since Mom got sick," Logan muttered with frustration. I took charge of the household situation, but not like I had before. I showed Logan carefully how to split chores fairly with Ellie, assigning dishes for her and laundry for him. "You're the team now," I told them both firmly. Hunter and Nora got simpler, age-appropriate tasks like tidying their rooms and putting away their toys. I stuck strictly to my conditions, driving over to the house after finishing my coffee shop shifts to cook dinner and check everyone's homework. I absolutely refused to sleep over at the house, heading back to my studio apartment each night without exception. One evening, Ellie asked me sadly, "Why can't you stay here with us?" I knelt down beside her to her level. "I'm here for you kids, but I need my own place to live." She nodded with understanding, but her eyes were unmistakably sad. Blake's emotional distance and absence made things considerably worse for everyone. He'd come home extremely late, barely acknowledging the kids' existence. One night, I found Nora crying heartbrokenly because he'd completely forgotten her school play performance. "He said he'd be there for sure," she sobbed uncontrollably. I held her close, my anger at Blake simmering dangerously beneath the surface. Logan overheard the conversation and scoffed bitterly. "He's checked out completely. Always has been, really." I didn't argue with his assessment because Logan was absolutely right. The family was rapidly unraveling and falling apart, and I couldn't fix it completely, not fully. I focused all my energy on keeping the kids stable, making absolutely sure they ate properly, slept enough, and felt safe and secure. Tara checked in one afternoon while I was helping Hunter struggle through his math homework. "You're doing too much again," she warned me over the phone. "Don't let them pull you back into that old pattern." I sighed heavily with exhaustion. It's just 3 months for the kids' sake. I've got firm boundaries this time around. Tara wasn't convinced at all. "Watch out carefully for Cheryl. She'll lean on you heavily when she's out of the hospital. I knew deep down she was right, but the kids' faces kept me going and motivated. I wasn't their mother, but I couldn't bear to let them fall apart during this crisis. By the second month of this arrangement, I'd settled into a functional routine. Work my shifts, help the kids with their needs, then back to my studio for the night. Cheryl called, sometimes from the hospital asking for updates on the kids, but I kept our conversations short and factual. Blake's absence grew heavier and more obvious. He'd mumble vague excuses about overtime at work, but never actually pitched in to help with anything. Logan stepped up admirably, handling grocery runs and calming Nora's frequent nightmares. But I saw the emotional strain clearly in his tired eyes. One night he admitted to me, quietly, "I'm scared for Mom's health, but I'm really mad at her too. She's never actually here for us, even when she's not sick." I nodded with understanding, my heart aching deeply for him and his conflicted feelings. I couldn't stay forever in this situation, but for now, I'd hold things together as best I could. As I drove home to my apartment, my design sketches waiting patiently on my desk, I felt a quiet resolve strengthening inside me. I was helping them through this crisis, but I wouldn't lose myself again in the process. 3 months later, Cheryl was finally discharged from the hospital, her newborn baby son cradled in her arms. I'd kept my promise completely, helping the kids through her extended bed rest period, but I was done now. I met her at the house one last time, my resolve absolutely firm and unshakable. "I'm out," I said, clearly standing in the kitchen. "I love the kids dearly, but I can't be part of this dysfunctional situation anymore." Cheryl's eyes narrowed with anger and resentment. "You're abandoning us again," she snapped accusingly. I shook my head firmly. "I've given more than enough. You're their mother. Step up and be a parent." She didn't respond with any words, just turned away from me dismissively. That was it, the final moment. I walked out of that house, cutting the cord for good this time. I couldn't completely leave the kids hanging without support, though. Logan, Ellie, Hunter, and Nora deserved so much better than their parents' chaotic mess. I called Tara, who lived closer to them geographically. "Can you be their lifeline and support system?" I asked hopefully. She agreed without any hesitation whatsoever. "Of course, I'll be there for them," Tara said immediately. "Those kids deserve someone stable in their lives." I started sending her $50 every month from my coffee shop paycheck to help cover school supplies, snacks, or whatever small things the kids needed. It wasn't much, but it was something tangible I could do to help from a distance. Tara set up video calls twice a week on a regular schedule, and during those precious calls, I'd guide Logan patiently through complicated algebra problems or help Ellie carefully with her essay outlines and writing assignments. Hunter absolutely loved showing me his various science projects with enthusiasm, holding them up to the camera and explaining every detail. And Nora would chatter endlessly about her colorful drawings, describing each character and story with animated excitement. It wasn't the same as being physically there with them, but it kept us genuinely connected without Cheryl's constant chaos and drama pulling me back into that destructive cycle. Word gradually got back to me through Tara that Cheryl's life was rapidly falling apart in spectacular fashion. Her job at the call center let her go due to too many missed shifts during her recovery period from the pregnancy. Blake suddenly packed a bag one night and left without any warning, no explanation provided, just gone without a trace. Logan told Tara that their neighbors had stopped coming by to check on the family, tired of Cheryl's endless excuses and manufactured drama. The kids were clearly struggling with all these changes, but I couldn't fix their parents' problems. I focused entirely on what I could actually do from where I was, sending a little money when possible, checking in regularly through Tara, encouraging Logan to keep the younger ones on track with their schoolwork and daily routines. It hurt deeply to hear Ellie's voice crack with emotion during our calls, but I knew that staying away from Cheryl was the only way to truly protect myself and maintain my hard-won independence. Meanwhile, I threw myself completely into freelancing with renewed determination. I'd been diligently taking design classes online during late nights, and a classmate from one of those courses connected me with a small business owner needing a professional logo. That initial job led directly to another opportunity, then a comprehensive website redesign project for a charming local cafe. By the end of that month, I had 3 steady clients producing regular income, enough to finally quit the coffee shop job that had been sustaining me. I spent my days completely immersed in creative work, sketching initial concepts, tweaking layouts until they were perfect, and pitching innovative ideas to potential clients. My tiny studio apartment was now lined with colorful mood boards and organized color swatches, covering nearly every wall. For the first time in my entire life, I felt like I was genuinely building something real and substantial, something that was entirely mine and couldn't be taken away. A client paid me $500 for a complete branding package, and I nearly cried tears of joy and relief when I saw that payment hit my account. It was significantly more than I'd made in an entire week of exhausting shifts at the coffee shop. The validation felt incredible, like all my sacrifices and late nights were finally paying off in tangible ways. Tara kept me regularly updated on the kids and their well-being, but she also consistently warned me about Cheryl's behavior. "She's been asking about you constantly," Tara said during one of our phone calls. "She says you owe her for everything she supposedly did for you." I laughed bitterly at the absurdity. She can't guilt me anymore. I'm done with that manipulation. I'd learned my painful lesson after her vindictive stunt with the police and the false accusations. I told Tara explicitly to keep my phone number private and confidential, and only pass on messages that came directly from the kids themselves, never from Cheryl. Logan texted me late one night saying that Cheryl was struggling badly to pay basic bills. I sent Tara an extra $20 for groceries to help the kids, but I deliberately didn't reach out to Cheryl directly. She'd made her choices repeatedly, and now she had to live with the consequences. The kids were my primary focus, even from this distance. I mailed Ellie a beautiful sketchbook for her birthday, and she sent me back a touching drawing of us together labeled "Best Aunt Ever" in colorful letters. Hunter called excitedly to tell me he'd won first place at the science fair, and I cheered him on enthusiastically through the screen, genuinely proud of his achievement. Nora asked for bedtime stories over the phone, her voice noticeably brighter and happier when I made up silly endings that made her giggle uncontrollably. Logan was quieter and more withdrawn than the others, carrying far too much responsibility for a 15-year-old. "Mom's not even trying anymore," he admitted to me once during a private conversation. "She just sleeps all day and complains." I told him gently to focus on his schoolwork and his own future, and promised sincerely that I'd always be there for him and his siblings, just not physically in Cheryl's house anymore. As my freelance design work continued to grow and expand, I landed a significant contract with a promising Madison startup, designing their entire marketing campaign from scratch. It was absolutely grueling work, involving late nights and seemingly endless revisions, but it paid enough to comfortably cover my rent and even save a little money each month. I wasn't rich by any means, but I was genuinely free from dependency and control. Cheryl's world was visibly crumbling around her, and part of me felt the heavy weight of her downfall and struggles. But I couldn't carry her anymore. I simply didn't have the capacity or the obligation. The kids had Tara as their local support system, and they had me in the way that truly mattered through encouragement, financial help when possible, and consistent emotional connection. I looked at my latest design project glowing brightly on my laptop screen and felt a powerful surge of pride wash over me. I'd built this entire life from absolutely nothing, from the ashes of a failed bakery and 3 years of unpaid labor. And no one, especially not Cheryl, could take this achievement away from me. Months continued to pass, and my client list grew steadily. I was now working with 7 regular clients, and my income had tripled from what I made at the coffee shop. I moved from my tiny studio into a modest, one-bedroom apartment with actual space to work and breathe. I set up a proper home office with a large desk, professional lighting, and a comfortable chair. Every morning, I woke up excited to work on my projects, not dreading the day ahead. The kids continued to thrive despite their chaotic home situation. Logan started applying to colleges with Tara's help, his grades strong despite everything he'd been through. Ellie joined the art club at school and sent me photos of her work regularly. Hunter became obsessed with robotics, and Nora was reading at a level above her grade. They were resilient in ways I never expected, and I was so incredibly proud of each of them. Tara told me that Cheryl had lost the house eventually. She'd moved into a small apartment with the kids, downsizing significantly. Blake never came back, never even called to check on his children. The new baby, whose name I'd learned was Mason, was growing up without his father around. It was tragic in so many ways, but it was also the natural consequence of Cheryl's choices and Blake's abandonment. I continued sending money monthly, now $100 instead of $50, because I could afford it and because the kids needed it desperately. But I maintained my boundaries firmly. I never spoke directly to Cheryl, never gave her my address, never let her back into my life in any meaningful way. The kids knew how to reach me, and that was enough. One evening, nearly a year after I'd moved out, Logan called me with unexpected news. "Mom got a job," he said, sounding surprised. "At a grocery store. It's not much, but she's actually showing up." I felt a cautious hope. Maybe Cheryl was finally stepping up, finally being the parent her kids deserved. Time would tell, but I wasn't holding my breath or making any assumptions. My design business continued to flourish beyond my wildest dreams. I landed a contract with a national brand, designing packaging for their new product line. The payment was more than I'd made in an entire year at the coffee shop. I stared at the contract in disbelief, then called Tara to celebrate. "You did it," she said proudly. "You really built something incredible." I thought about the past 4 years, the sacrifices and struggles, the false accusations and betrayals, the guilt and the anger. But I also thought about where I was now, sitting in my own apartment, running my own successful business, maintaining healthy relationships with my nieces and nephews without sacrificing myself. I'd found the balance I never thought possible. The kids were growing up fast. Logan graduated high school and got accepted to the University of Wisconsin with a partial scholarship. I contributed what I could to help with expenses, proud beyond words. Ellie was thriving in high school, talking about art school and her future. Hunter and Nora were doing well, more stable now that Cheryl had consistent work. I finally felt like I could breathe, like I'd made the right choice in leaving. The guilt that had plagued me for so long was gone, replaced by certainty that I'd done what was necessary for everyone's well-being, including my own. Looking back now, I realized that leaving wasn't abandonment. It was survival. It was choosing myself when no one else would. It was setting an example for those kids that you don't have to sacrifice everything for family, that boundaries are healthy, that your dreams matter too. And most importantly, it was proving to myself that I was worthy of a life I chose, not one that was chosen for me. If you've ever been in a situation where family expected you to give up everything, where you felt trapped by obligation and guilt, I hope my story shows you that it's okay to choose yourself. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to walk away from toxicity, even when it's family. Your life, your dreams, your well-being, they all matter. Thank you so much for watching my story. If you've experienced something similar with family members taking advantage of you, or if you've had to make the difficult choice to set boundaries with loved ones, please share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you handled it and what advice you might have for others going through similar situations. Don't forget to smash that like button if this story resonated with you. And please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos where I'll be sharing more about how my design business grew and the ongoing journey with my nieces and nephews. Hit that notification bell to be the first to know when new content drops. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to connect with you in the comments. Take care of yourselves, set those boundaries, and remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary.